Welcome back, friend, to Extraordinary Strides. Today we're going to dive into a topic that is near and dear to my heart, the back of the pack, runner's guide to racing. Running at the back of the pack is not just about finishing, it's about perseverance, creativity, and celebrating your unique journey. As both a coach to incredible back of the pack athletes and someone who has had my own seasons at the back, I've learned firsthand that traditional road running advice doesn't always serve as well as the strategies that ultra runners rely on are actually much better for back of the pack runners. So we're going to dive into some of that here and now. We're going to talk about how to train smarter, how to race confidently, and embrace the extraordinary journey of being a back of the pack super awesome runner. Later in this episode, I also have a very special guest joining us, a runner who has embraced this mindset, and she's achieved amazing things, including her pursuit to the Abbott World Marathon Major 6 stars as a back of the pack runner herself. First, let's break down how to prepare for your next race as a back of the pack runner. So what we want to focus on is training smarter, building endurance, and feeling empowered through self-reliance. Because when you're spending 6, 8, or even more hours on the course, your training needs to reflect that reality. Thinking beyond just miles, you're not just training to finish a race, you're preparing for the entire day, from early wake-ups to running through meals and possibly even into the night. So we're going to start first with time on feet focus. Your training runs need to reflect the duration of your race, not just the distance. So if you anticipate like a 7-hour marathon, you should be preparing your body to stay on its feet for that long, incorporating walk breaks and slower paces as needed. I also love the idea of you including back-to-back long runs in your plan or splitting up your long runs to tackle the mileage. This will give you the opportunity to run like 3 hours on a Saturday, maybe 2 hours that Saturday night or 2 hours on Sunday. This does simulate fatigue and helps you build stamina without overtraining or overtaxing your body. This is actually a tactic, again, used by ultra runners quite frequently. Instead of going out for monster mileage all at one fell swoop, they'll break up to 2-a-days or get their weekend mileage over 2 to 3, maybe even 4 runs. So again, going for that time on our feet, simulating a bit of fatigue, but not overstressing our bodies, because you know how I feel about it. The best way to get to a finish line is to make it safely and healthfully to the start line. Now, one thing that I see a lot of runners overlooking is standing time, because back of the pack runners often face long waits in corrals before their race even starts. So for example, Run Disney or even New York City. For New York City, I had to wake up about 5 a.m. I had to get to the start village. I didn't get started until 11:30 before my wave even got really on the go. That's about 6 hours of being awake before I even started running. So on training days, simulate this. Wake up at the same time you'll need to on race day, have your breakfast, wait a little bit before you actually get started on your run. Mimic the time you're going to spend standing or lightly walking in the corral to acclimate your body. Now, while there are strategies on what you can do in starting villages or in your corrals to minimize that time on your feet, it is good to take it into account so that you're not totally taken off course or thrown off when you get to these bigger races or these longer run events, like again, Run Disney. So it's really important that when you do tackle this, you do realize that you need to include some additional nutrition. We're going to get into that conversation quite a bit. But for right now, let's also discuss self-supporting your training. One of the things that I feel was really, really great about the Every Women's Marathon that we recently had a recap on was that it was a very inclusive, time-inclusive race. But I still encourage quite often with my back of the pack runners to self-support, because we don't really know what the course was going to have, what was going to be available. So aid stations can run out, supplies can dwindle, roads may even reopen. Back of the pack runners must prepare to feel empowered on race day by being self-reliant. So having hydration packs and snacks, practice carrying your essentials, water, electrolytes, fuel during your long runs. A fully loaded pack feels different than an empty one. So gradually add weight to your gear during training. Don't try to go out there with 15 or 20 pounds worth of gear, for the record. But do practice that during your long runs, creating that opportunity to also explore more of that portable nutrition outside of just the traditional gels that maybe road racers tend to gravitate toward. And of course, adding in cross-training for durability and endurance. We're going to want to add in that strength training, so keep your legs strong and your core ready to help sustain you throughout that longer time on the course and to help reduce fatigue and increase resilience. Activities like hiking and cycling are also great for endurance and mimicking being out there on the course for a long time. Now, I've already touched on simulating race conditions, but let's talk a little bit more about that. So every back of the pack runner experience is completely unique. But if you do expect to start late and finish after dark or even run through mealtimes like I did in New York City, then you want to prepare accordingly. So practice running through those meals on your long runs, experiment with fueling strategies that sustain you through lunch and dinner. So this is where, again, you got to go past just the typical gel. You may need to pack something that is more like a trail mix or even a little bit of like a Uncrustable. Small sandwiches are great options. Thinking again, like the traditional ultra runner, you want to also train and be prepared for the shift of lights. You may start in the bright, beautiful sun, but by the time you start getting towards those latter miles or that finish line, it is quite possible that you may not even have as much light available to you. So if you anticipate finishing after sunset, practice running with a headlamp or reflective gear to feel comfortable and safe. And of course, prepare for weather. And that's not always easy to do if you're training in Florida in summer and doing a fall or a winter race somewhere else, or vice versa. I do comprehend that there's always going to be some challenges, but trying to incorporate and simulate those race conditions a little bit more so you feel a bit more acclimated, feel a little bit more prepared. That goes a long way just in boosting your confidence for race day, if nothing else. So essentially, we want to train for the whole experience, from waiting in that starting corral, getting to the starting corral, getting out to the run, and then even afterwards, which brings us again to that fueling and hydration. I've already touched on it, but it deserves its own dedicated focus. I've mentioned aid stations may run out of supplies. They may even close down or get broken down before you reach them. Again, that being self-reliant, being self-sufficient is essential. Now, one of the things, though, that is a little tricky is how do you really pack that much stuff? How do you keep it fresh? Well, freezing your hydration packs in bottles, starting with partially frozen water or electrolyte drinks, can be very helpful. As they melt, you have cold hydration for hours. Using ice packs, storing some of those perishable snacks like those sandwiches or Uncrustables or maybe even energy bars in small insulated bags with ice packs to keep them from spoiling. So if I haven't already mentioned, you're gonna want your hydration vest or your gear to have lots and lots of pockets, lots of compartments, because you're gonna need them, my friend. And then I am a huge fan of pre-portioning your snacks because, again, you are on the move, you are on the groove. You don't necessarily want to stop and you can't pull over and have an entire sandwich. So cutting up little single-serve sizes of those snacks like trail mix, dried fruit, or pretzels and resealable bags for easy access really does help. Again, learning from ultra runners, one of the things that's really important is variety is key here. If you're out there for multiple hours, palate fatigue is a thing. You can't just rely 100% on gels. While they are wonderful, it's quite possible your body will reject them towards the end of the longer mileage. So include both sweet and savory options, maybe a little bit like salted pretzels. Lots of hydration because your mouth will be dry during this time. And of course, packing just a little bit extra. What's the worst thing that happens if you're done and you have extra fuel? Nothing, right? You can just reuse it next time. Now back to hydration. You're going to invest in a hydration pack with multiple storage compartments, as I've already mentioned, but you're going to want to also bring electrolyte tablets or powders to mix on the go. So if your hydration pack has a couple of extra bottles, bonus points for that as well. Now we're touching on gear and gearing up for the long haul because it often requires a little bit more gear preparation than if you were to go out there and run a marathon in 3 or 4 or even 5 hours. So your battery life for the win If you want to be able to have your phone available to you, you need to utilize it afterwards or for in case of an emergency or for your music, whatever the case may be. You're going to want to truly invest in battery life that goes the distance with you, which can be a little bit harder. So if for your cell phone, I'm going to say that investing in a slimline, small charger and a cord to recharge your phone is really clutch, especially for some of these big races where you're standing around for a very long time. You may be draining your battery while you're waiting in that corral. Again, looking for GPS watches that have extended battery life, 10 hours or more in activity mode. Wireless headphones designed for ultra distance. There are some pro shocks that could be helpful, or even having a backup way of listening to your music or your audiobook, or practicing going without and just immersing yourself into the experience. But really thinking about what is it that you need for that long time that you might be out there to feel as comfortable and feel as supported as possible. Which might mean bringing a little bit of it, like an individual sized pack of anti-chafing balm, a small first aid kit in your pack. Blisters and chafing can not necessarily end your race, but they can definitely make it quite uncomfortable. So all of those little details. And then you're going to want to build your race day support system. Again, ultra runners rely on their crew to get them through those long races. Now I want you to bring in your cheer squad, enlist friends or family to meet you at designated spots along the course that you're going to pre-choose before you go out there with extra snacks, hydration, or gear. Provide them with the map, estimated time so they can track your progress. Maybe even utilizing, I've heard recently a great idea of using an air tag so that you can have a reliability despite what the GPS or the tracking may state on the actual official race website. So again, having all of these things built in. And one of the things that I'm going to highly suggest and why I'm so excited to bring in our guest today is community support with finding other back of the packers during the race or during your training journey, encouraging one another, sharing supplies even if needed when you're out there, and celebrating your collective journey. Now, I'm going to get into how to find the best races for you as a back of the pack runner. I also have a few more little tidbits that I've learned over the years, questions to ask the race director before you sign up for a race, and how we can shift our mindset when it comes to going the distance. But before I do that, I think it's really important that I bring my guest on in because she is truly extraordinary, my friends. With that said, I can't wait to introduce you to Theresa Puckett because Theresa is the founder of the 6-Star Medal Back of the Pack Facebook group, a supportive community for runners chasing big dreams no matter what their pace is. Theresa is also a nursing professor, a charity fundraiser, a runner with an extraordinary resume. She's completed Berlin and Chicago, the Dopey Challenge, 2 Everesting events, 2 50-mile races. I'm telling you, my friend, she has done quite a bit. We're going to dive into Theresa's journey, the unique experiences as a back-of-the-pack runner at major marathons. Oh, and I'm going to say, do not forget to check out episode notes because there's a link to Theresa's Facebook group page, 6-Star Medal Back of the Pack Facebook group. And we're going to learn all about how she's making a difference as a fundraiser and raising awareness for Hope Story with Running on Hope Virtual 5K. You can find that link in episode notes as well. Let's bring her on in. Welcome, Theresa, to Extraordinary Strides.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, I'm so excited. I've loved your Facebook group from the minute I first found it and thought I cannot wait to talk to her. First of all, because I just want to talk about 6 stars with somebody who's also kind of on the same pathway, but also because you have really made a very inclusive, supportive community. So with that, before we get into all the nitty gritty, I'm going to ask you if you could run any race in the world, location, theme, or experience, no limits, what would it be? And why would that be the specific race you'd want to do?
I would love to do the Polar Circle Marathon in Greenland. They have a polar bear challenge where you can run a half marathon one day and a full marathon the next day. Living in Buffalo, New York, I love the cold weather. I love running in snow. I love the quiet of the winter, the crunch of the snow under my feet, just the cool air. And I feel very effective as a cold weather runner. So that would be my event. Plus, I think that kind of, it takes a little bit more to go run in extreme weather versus going out to run on a beautiful day. So I feel like it would elevate me to a new level of coolness that I would like to obtain.
I wholeheartedly agree. And as I'm here as a Florida runner and just talked it over with my girls this morning when we went out for our run, where the fact that you guys have to strategically and thoughtfully plan the amount of layers that you require to go out, because we were bundled up in our, I think, 45, 50-degree weather, was just freezing for us. Yes, I give you guys so much kudos. I can't even fathom having to layer that much to go out into the snow. Ice lashes are definitely one of the coolest things you could ever see on Instagram. So that's a cool one, though. And I think, does that one also have a little bit of an opportunity? Sometimes it aligns where you can see the northern lights as well.
I think so.
Okay.
And we do sometimes get the northern lights here in Buffalo as well, but I'm sure that seeing them there would be a lot more clear.
Ooh, that's a great one. Okay, I'm going to invite myself along, but you're going to have to help dress me because, I have no clue. Okay, my friend, let's get into it. Let's start way back in the beginning because I don't think that you're a new runner, are you?
No, I ran cross country and track in high school.
So you got into, you mean you were an athlete? Did you at that time identify as an athlete?
I don't think I realized I was an athlete, but I did earn my varsity letter in cross country and track. So looking back on it now, I would love to have my 5K time that I had then.
Oh, coulda, woulda, shoulda. If we would have had the wisdom to appreciate the things when we have them. And again, that's a great reminder for today as well. Tell me how that went from, like, what happened? Like, you continued in your cross country? Did you continue running? I came to running much later in life. Tell me a little bit about your running journey and how it's unfolded and evolved.
Sure. So I stepped away from my running journey when I went to nursing school. Nursing school was all encompassing. And looking back on it now, I think running would have helped me through nursing school. But at the same time that I went through nursing school, I had 3 young children. At the end of nursing school, I was pregnant with my fourth. So, in the journey of becoming a nurse, starting a new job, getting my master's degree, my PhD, I mean, gosh, I was in school for 15 years and raising 4 children, I feel like I stepped away from myself and who I was. And I really appreciated getting back into running. It was, gosh, probably, yeah, about 3 years ago or so that I said, I need to find myself again. And part of that journey was the kids leaving the nest
Mm.
and me being able to refocus on myself. I'm 51 now. I had my kids when I was young. And I looked around at my life and I said, okay, they're leaving. I have more time on my hands. And what do I want to do? But I also realized like how overweight I was and how much my knees hurt. At the beginning of my running journey, I was walking. And
Mhm.
that's okay. And it's okay to start out that way. I remember starting out on the treadmill at 2.4 miles per hour. And I could do that for about 15 or 20 minutes, and that was my max. And I realized that I was accepting all kinds of garbage into my life. Not just the garbage that I was putting into my mouth that made me overweight like that, but also just garbage in my home life, garbage in my work life. And I just decided overall, I'm putting up boundaries and I'm putting myself first. And that's how I started back on my running journey.
Oh, that's really powerful there because I think when I think of our health journey at any, so I, of course, we're talking about running. It's my jam. It's what I feel like helps to center me. But anything that we do in terms of movement, it is a way of showing how much we love ourselves, like loving ourselves healthy is the way that I phrase it. So I love how you just decided like, I am important, I'm valid, and I need to create this where it's a priority. Well, congratulations. Truly is. It's an incredible feat. And I'm sure that it's a very rewarding one. How has that changed, if it has, your relationship with running?
I feel like now my mantra, which I did set back then and I still have, is the word intentional. Being intentional about what I eat, being intentional about my activities, being intentional about how I spend my time. And one thing that really switched for me is switching from exercise to training. There's nothing wrong with exercising. There are a lot of exercises that are fun, but I'm focused now. I'm intentional to make sure that the time that I spend exercising is really training and focused on a goal. And it doesn't have to be like that for everybody, but if you're on a 6-star journey or doing some of these other sort of endurance events that I find myself involved with, then you need to be intentional. And especially I think at this age, 51 isn't that old, but it's old enough to where there's more increased risk of injury. And so you have to ask yourself, is this activity worth the extra toll that is on my body, and also the extra toll that is going to be on my mind, right? Because physical activity also takes mental capacity, and it can be mentally draining just as much as it can be physically draining. So I really have to ask myself, am I being intentional about what I'm doing right now?
That's very, very powerful, which of course talks about these really big endurance events. So, where in this process did you say, okay, I am back to being intentional with my time, and now I feel like I would like to move forward into what? Did you decide I'm going to do a 5K, a 10K? Did you just go all the way in and decide I'm going in for a marathon? How did that progress?
I decided to do a park run. And the reason I decided on park run was because it's free, it's easily accessible, and there are sweepers. So you are not going to be last. There are people that are designated to walk behind the last runner. And I was so proud of myself on my first park run. I said, I'm going to run the whole time. And about 3/4 of the way into it, a much older couple power walked past me while I was running. And I said, that's okay. I'm still running. And it was then that I decided, in a way, I'm going to put blinders on. And sometimes when you focus on a goal, or even if you're during a race, it's very easy to become distracted by what the people around you are doing, or even like in your life, what people are maybe saying about what you should be doing or can't do, or something like that. So you'll notice, like if you ever watch me run kind of these bigger events, a lot of times I kind of have my head down. And I do that because it's just my way of sort of blocking out all the other distractions. One thing that people do a lot at races, especially community races, is they go out too fast. I mean, you'll see people at a community race that maybe aren't as well trained and they're going out fast. You have to be able to resist that. You have to be able to say, no, that's not my pace. I'm not doing that. So putting the blinders on and focusing on yourself is so helpful.
I feel like this is going to be a very powerful conversation because you're already giving so much really great takeaways for anyone who is participating or considering participating in these. So I love how you described the park run, how it helped you kind of stay in your own lane. And then along the way, it sounds like you felt more, well, I feel like you approached this from a place of empowerment, but do you feel like you grew into more of a confidence to continue challenging yourself?
Absolutely felt more confident. I do have a coach.
Okay.
I obtained a coach through my, jumping ahead a little bit, 29029 community.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been working with her for 2 years now. And she has been a really good sounding board for ideas that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
And to have somebody say to me, no, that's not a crazy idea to want to do that. I think you should go for it. And we
Yeah.
all need those sort of cheerleaders in our
Yeah.
life. We need a community, or at least a person that is cheerleading us when we might not even believe ourselves that we can do something.
Absolutely. You just nailed it as to one of the biggest reasons why I think that working with a coach is really important for folks. And I think there's also this qualifier where we seem to think like, well, I'm not really a quote unquote elite runner, serious runner, or whatever those words are that we want to use to qualify and maybe even diminish our desires and dreams that people utilize, where it's like, we need that extra sense of support. But I want to ask you, because you identify as a back of the pack runner, I want to talk about that terminology first of all. Do you feel like it carries any negative connotations, or you feel very confident in that connotation? And did you start calling yourself that, or did you hear it from others?
Really good question. So I know from being involved with other Facebook groups that are focused on the 6-star journey that there is a negative connotation with back of the packers. There have been discussion threads that I have seen online in those groups that indicate that back of the pack runners should not be at world major marathons. I've seen comments that if you have to walk during a marathon, then you don't belong at a world marathon major. And I would say that you never know where someone is on their journey. A back of the pack runner does not equal untrained. Even though I'm back of the pack runner, I'm not untrained. I spend a lot of time on my training. I have a coach, I have a nutritionist. I'm very intentional with my training. A back of the pack runner could be somebody who's new to the sport. It could be someone who's returning to the sport. It could be someone who's injured or recovering from an injury. It could be someone who, is putting their heart and soul into it. And for whatever reason, no, they're not an elite runner. They're not a front of the packer, right? There's just so many reasons why somebody could be at back of the pack. Me personally, I started working as a nurse when I was very young. I have spent now 26 years walking on concrete hospital floors. Even though I'm a nursing instructor, I still work at a hospital and I teach clinicals at hospitals. I was told in my about mid-30s that I had arthritis all the way down my back and in both knees. I had a podiatrist around that time telling me I had the feet of a 90-year-old because of how much arthritis was in my feet. Wow. So I kind of got into a discussion with somebody on a different website, a different Facebook group about back of the pack and specifically Boston qualifying. And this individual was saying anybody.
I'm going to caveat this real quick. I will say, for whatever reason, people go crazy about this Boston qualifying. This is where you're going to see the most amount of elitism in the world marathon majors. Okay. I have to just say that because it's my issue too. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So this person said that anybody can Boston qualify if they just train hard enough. And I felt that that was implying that you're not training hard enough if you can't Boston qualify. So I said, well, what if you have a medical condition that's going to prohibit you from those type of times? And I don't mean to be negative on myself, but I think I'm realistic. I was told like 4 years ago, I need both my knees replaced, like I don't know if I'm going to be able to Boston qualify at this time. I look at the Boston qualifying time for an 80-year-old woman and I can't make that. So, and it's really not for lack of trying or effort or training. And so I kind of got into it with that person. So yeah, I think there's a lot of negative connotation with back of the pack, but I think we have a lot of grit. I think maybe it's a little more difficult to do something that you're not great at than to do something that you're very good at.
Yes, because I think that's where we start to see where we have created a society or in a culture that really highly prizes being successful in all of our endeavors versus really celebrating the journey and the process and the evolution with little tiny potential improvements and a whole lot of setbacks. And that's realistically, I think, what is the most important part. If you're going to make running something that you endeavor to do, you're not going to go out and PR every single race. You're not going to necessarily feel your best from season to season. It is something where you constantly have to iterate and take those highs and lows. So I love that you're calling that out. What do you feel, first of all, about the term back of the pack? Do you feel like it's an effective way of describing the individuals that do maybe have a longer finish time or are on the course a bit longer?
I think so, yes, because really with any pack, you're going to have a front, a middle, and a back.
Okay.
So for me personally, I don't think it's a negative thing.
Okay.
It's describing where we are in that situation. And there are some races where I'm not back of the pack. I've run some community 5Ks where I've gotten second place in my age group, third place in my age group. So I'm not always back of the pack. World Marathon Major, it's maybe a little different of a crowd than a community-based race in my neighborhood, right? And so I am more back of the pack there.
Where do you feel, if any, that we're seeing? So we're in the middle of another running boom. And we saw this happen. I did a Running Through the Decades actual series. And so we saw running booms happen in the 70s and the 80s, a little bit on the 90s, but we really saw this really big running boom happen with the pandemic, where a lot of people, all the gyms were shuttered, people started running. And then when things started to reopen, they stuck around with running, and we're in a really wonderful space, I feel, where running boom has also intersected with a more inclusive mindset. So it isn't necessarily as elite or as, I think anyway, from what I've seen it change in the time that I've been involved with running. So do you feel like we're starting to scratch the surface of becoming more pace inclusive, or are you feeling like the majors out of all of the races probably has the most work to do? What are your thoughts on that so far?
I think that we are becoming more inclusive. I like that some of the local races, at least in my area, do have the option for an earlier start time for people who are pacing maybe a little slower
Mm-hmm.
and feel like they want a little extra time. So I love that. I would love to see the majors do that more. I think there was, what was it, Chicago maybe, or was it Berlin, where you could maybe ask for like a earlier start time for medical, I think, right? So I think that that would be good. But I realize that we do need to have some cutoff times. Even though I'm back of the pack, there are streets that need to reopen, especially with these world marathon majors
That are
and
shutting down the entire city. Yes. Yeah.
right. And so I do again want to emphasize back of the pack versus untrained, because I do belong to a number of Facebook groups for Run Disney
Mm-hmm.
events. And there are
Mm-hmm.
people in there that will sign up for a half marathon, the full marathon. It's 2 weeks before the event, and they come on and I'm sure you've seen it too. They make a post where it's like, well, I haven't trained at all, but do you think I can go out and do this half marathon or full marathon? And you see the comments there are like, oh yeah, you can do it. You can just do it. Well, maybe you can do it, but is it safe for you to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's probably not very safe to
I call
to
it,
do
I call
that.
it paying the bills. So you can either pay the bills during your training in terms of showing up and making sure that it's on time, or you can wait till race day and then have penalties, interest charges, late fees, and it just does not feel good. You don't
It
want to pay the
doesn't feel
bills
good.
that way. And speaking for somebody who has gone into actually a couple of races untrained, and that's really where I walked away with, I'm not doing that again. It's just not worth it to me. But yes, I want to call back or bring back to the back of the pack. I think that this is where I want folks that maybe are mid pack or front of the pack and they don't even realize the potential challenges at the back of the pack has. Because I'm going to tell you from both being on the race course, supporting race courses, helping in a smaller degree, either with supporting or volunteering or a little bit of race directing, seeing what it all takes. And no one in the back of the pack wants special treatment. And I think that's something that we need to, first of all, call out. Like if the front of the pack or the folks that are like, oh, they just want special treatment, that's not at all the case. It's actually just wants the fair treatment. And back of the pack, a lot of times is prepared to actually have and accept not even what like the mid pack gets, because most back of the pack knows that it's possible you're not going to get to an aid station. They're not going to have water. They're not going to have fuel, and they kind of have to learn how to self-support. So it's not that anybody in the back of the pack wants the roads to never be reopened or for, a huge celebration just for them. That's not what it all is being asked. It's just a fair treatment and a chance to be able to actually tackle some of these really big endeavors. So I'm so glad that you do bring that to the attention of individuals. Tell me more a little bit about why you feel that the majors is something that might be a bit more, cause a little bit more angina or anxiety or like fear for folks that are at the back of the pack, or maybe even at the slower part of the mid pack to tackle. Is it just because of the road closures or because of the pace or the finish line cutoffs, or are there other aspects of it as well?
I think it's a couple things that you mentioned as well regarding running out of resources. If
Mm-hmm.
someone signs up for a race and it's advertised well in advance, here's when the finish line is going to close.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have to get done in this time frame or you're going to get swept. I think of Berlin that has the couple of, points and then the finish line closes, right? Then, you do need to train to be able to get done in that time frame. But if you get done in that time frame, I think there should still be resources on the course.
Yep, absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think we're starting to see that more and more where races, I'm thinking about the year that I did London. London swept early. and the backlash that they received from that sweeping early. They really, really took great care to try to right that wrong by apologizing, by offering another opportunity for individuals to come back out the following year. So I think we're starting to see, again, as the racing community grows, the running community grows, that a lot more races are being held responsible to truly provide that support for the entire race field, because that is incredibly important. Can we talk a little bit about maybe what you feel is a set of challenges or maybe opportunities that the back of the pack should take into account? If I hear, like, if somebody's listening in and they're thinking, I consider myself back of the pack, but I've always been afraid to do the majors, what are some reassurances or some things that you would ask them to consider as they move forward with that potential journey?
I would like them to consider how very difficult it is to do what back of the packers do. We're on that course for 6, sometimes more hours. The average person who is not out there training would probably find difficulty doing 26.2 miles in any time frame. So be proud of yourself, be proud of what you can accomplish, and compare you to you.
I'm going to build on that a little bit. That's super important. Absolutely. I think that's also something that where if you do consider yourself back of the pack, I like to present that it's almost more of an ultra event, because the amount of time that you're going to be on your feet, and even I'm going to call it Run Disney, because Run Disney people, and I am a Run Disney individual and work with a lot of Run Disney athletes. If we take into consideration, like the majors as well, the fact how early you have to get there before the race actually starts, before your corral gets up to the start line, you're talking about hours already on your feet. You're not necessarily walking out your front door and jumping into, like you said, a community race. It's probably a mile or two sometimes before you even get to that start line. So there's so much extra time on your feet, and then the race course time, and then getting back. It is something where it really needs to be taken into account, not from a place of fear, but of a place of being strategic with how you approach it, so that you do feel confident on that course, or as confident as possible. Is there a specific race of the 6 World Marathon Majors? And I'm going to talk about Sydney being added in just a moment, but is there a particular course that you feel is one, either most welcoming and most inclusive, that maybe a person who's endeavoring should consider that one as their first one? And then I want you to talk about, in your opinion, if there's one that you feel is most off-putting, or it creates a little bit of that elitism, that there's fear around it.
Sure. So I haven't run all 6. I've just run 2. So I can really only speak to the 2 that I've run regarding the course. I really think Chicago is a good place to start.
Yeah.
I really do. I thought, they still had gel on the course when I got there. I was done in I think it was 6:18 or 6:23. I can't remember, but let's say 6 hours and 20 minutes. There was still gel on the course. There was still water. There was still electrolyte. There was still fans, a crowd, a support. So I felt like, as a back of the pack runner, there was a lot of people in the back of the pack for Chicago. So yeah, I would have to vote for Chicago there. Now, as far as the other question that you asked me, I don't even know if I want to run Boston, and that's such a horrible thing to say. I
say it all the time.
Well, talk about inclusivity. I know it would not make any difference, but I would love to email Abbott and say, could you please put a little pressure on them to have a lottery? I know I'm not going to be able to Boston qualify. Okay. I could train 10 times harder than I am right now. Potentially, I'd probably get injured, but I don't think I can qualify. Right. And I don't think that's mental. I think that's, again, realistic from where
honestly,
I am right
there's
now.
always going to be a genetic, if you talk to any elite individual, they will always give credit to not only the work that they put in, but the genetics that they have that they bring to the table. So there's always going to be that component. So yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I feel like that too, that there's some genetics involved. So yes. So just the way that people talk about it in Facebook groups, and the elitism in those groups, makes me kind of turned off on it. And the fact that I can't enter through a lottery, which means my only other option is to try to fundraise at least $10,000, right? That's what these charities want. And that's very hard to do. I know that from fundraising for my Run Disney events, that it's very challenging. And especially If you are like a um charity runner, there's only so many times that you can ask your friends and your family and your coworkers for
Yeah.
money or to support what you're doing. You'd have to come up with some really creative ideas to get over $10,000 for these charities. So yeah, and then just the fact that on race day, when you're listening to people talk about the race and people are being interviewed about it and you're seeing these interviews maybe in videos on Facebook and things. Well, congratulations to the people who qualified. It's
Hmm.
not congratulations to the people who finished or who even had the guts to get to the start line. It was the finish or the qualifiers.
Qualifiers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that this is where, going back to what you said originally, where there was only so much that you were willing to take anymore in terms of not giving yourself the best, that you definitely have to mentally prepare yourself for Boston, and that you have to take in the positivity that will be there, because there will be some positivity. The crowds are going to be supportive. The city does come out to support, but there is a lot in there. And I know there is a lot of snobbishness and elitism within the running community for that race weekend event. There just is. However, I think we're starting to see glimmers. It is getting a little bit better. And I'm going to give a big shout out to the individuals that do work so hard for the nonprofits for Boston, because I think they're the ones that are really helping to lead the charge of saying, hey, my charity runners they're not just qualified, they're overqualified for what they have to do to bring to the table to be here. So I think with them leading the charge, we're going to see hopefully this race community open up a little bit more. I will say that one is actually my least favorite of the majors, just because I know that the running community is going to hate me for that. It's not as scenic as some of the other majors. It doesn't have the same vibes, but also because I value the inclusivity of like New York City, where you see the entire community come out and support, where you see that they open up the finish line until the very last runner comes through, or Chicago or Berlin. So there was just so many wonderful things. Now, tell me about some of the fears, if any, that may go through your mind with some of the course cutoffs that we see, like with Tokyo, or like you mentioned with Berlin. Does that play into your strategy, or do you just learn how to work within it in terms of how you go out there?
Oh, I was very afraid of Berlin.
Okay.
Because of the cutoffs.
Okay.
Because with Berlin, well, with any of these, I'm sure, it's not your personal
Mm-hmm.
time, it's time on a clock. So if you're back of the packer, you're not in corral A. You're in one of the last corrals.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the clock is already ticking, like the time is ticking. And so what I did was I took a sticker and I wrote on the sticker the mileage that I need to be at by a certain time of day for Berlin. And I stuck it on my arm and I just kept looking at it. And I'm like, okay, so then once I got past the cutoff, I'm like, okay, I made that one and I got a little leeway. Now let's go for the next one. In a way, it was motivating.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, because I knew I had to do that, because there's so much riding on traveling across the world for a race like that. The money, the time. And for that race, I had raised funds for Team Red, White, and Blue. So I had put a lot into this. And I was just determined that I was going to come home with that 50th anniversary medal. So
it was a beautiful medal.
It's so beautiful.
Congratulations. Yes. So I love that you're giving that perspective already, because that is something that I talk to individuals that are specifically the one that sticks out in my mind that is the most stringent of the 6 marathon majors is Tokyo. And specifically, that is one where, while it's not advisable for most runners to do a positive split run where they start faster and have to kind of start slowing down, that is one of the courses where, if you are back of the pack, that is a potential strategy. Or sometimes even run Disney, because we do see individuals who, like you said, they're training, they're putting in the work, but realistically, they just are not quite at the pace where they can meet these cutoffs. So it is something where you have to be very strategic of where you place yourself in the corral because that really does lend to it as well. And sometimes having a little bit of a different race strategy. So I appreciate this conversation because I don't want anyone who, no matter what your pace is, to think that these are not within the possibility. It's just going to look a little different for all of us. And that's something that's really important to know, that we just have to strategize to figure out how to make it happen. I want to bring it now. You've kind of started touching on fundraising a little bit. So clearly, you have a virtual 5K that I feel is near and dear to your heart. Tell us more about it, please.
Sure. So right now I'm raising funds for a charity called Hope Story. And Hope Story was started by a couple who had a child with Down syndrome. And when the baby was born, instead of the healthcare providers being so excited and congratulating them, the healthcare providers acted like it was a huge tragedy. And it made them feel sad about the birth of their baby instead of happy. So they started Hope Story with two intentions. Number one, to educate healthcare providers on how to speak with families who have a baby with Down syndrome, be more positive.
Right.
And then the second arm is they offer peer support for couples who have a baby with Down syndrome. So I can really identify with this charity because when I was working in pediatric ICU, I took care of a lot of children with Down syndrome because a lot of them are born with congenital heart defects that need to be repaired. And so we would become close with these families. There's also a patient that's very close to my heart. And she was born with Down syndrome, also born deaf and blind, and had cancer twice before the age of 3. So yeah, she's one that I will dedicate different runs and things to, when you can say running in honor of or whatever, because she and her whole family are just amazing. So I'm currently fundraising because I'm doing another Dope Eat challenge at Disney Marathon weekend, and so I'm raising funds for them. So I tried to do something creative because, again, it's difficult to just keep asking people for straight up donations and not giving them anything for that.
Right.
I've tried the football squares.
Yeah.
I'm selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace right now if anybody's interested in any of my stuff. So I thought I'm going to put together a virtual race. And I've had so much fun with this. I designed a wooden medal that's like the awareness ribbon. And at the end of each part of the ribbon is a sneaker. So it looks like the ribbon is running. And because the charity is Hope Story, I call it the Running on Hope 5K.
I love that.
Thank you.
And of course, friends, again, in episode notes, you will have that link so you can go and find it on Facebook, like the page, sign up. I think that having a virtual, especially this time of year, and if you're training for any event, throwing in a little virtual is such a great way to add an extra flair and fun for your typical training day. So I think that's a great way of getting in a little extra pep in your step, while knowing that you're making a difference for somebody as well. And I'm glad to hear that I'm going to see, we're going to have to connect for when you come down here for marathon weekend, because I'll be there every single day. Again, it's always a lot of fun with the Run Disney crowd as well. So where would you say that, as you have had such an inspiring journey yourself, what would you suggest to other individuals that maybe are kind of at that cusp where they're feeling like they want to follow in your footsteps, or they want to take part of maybe making those changes in their lives as well? Where would you tell them to start with?
I have a couple suggestions here, and one is to do maybe run walk intervals. So when I first started, it's not like I went out and was just able to run a marathon. So I downloaded a timer app and started with mainly walking with just shorter running intervals, and then I built it up from there. Another suggestion that I have is what I call loop races. I'm not sure if they have them where you're at, but it's a thing where, like, maybe you have 4 hours, 6 hours, however many hours to do a loop that's maybe a mile or 2 miles or whatever, and you can set up your own aid station. You're back to your aid station every mile or whatever. And I think that's a great a great way to get out there with other runners, kind of get over if you have any anxiety about running with other people, especially like back of the pack, you have this idea of I don't want to be last. Well, in a loop race, nobody knows if
Right.
you're on, the first lap, the 10th lap, right? It's truly a you versus you situation.
Also, nobody cares. I want you guys all to know that nobody really cares. They're so in their own zone of what they don't even know what number lap they're on. Is really what it comes down to. So yes, that's such a great recommendation.
Yes. Yes. And then I just would also say, just get out there and do it until you don't mind doing it. And then keep doing it until you like it. And then one day you're going to love it.
Oh, that's so incredible. I agree. I mean, there's going to be days where you don't love it, but you're always going to love the aspects of how you feel afterward or the extra confidence it gives you, because I feel like this is such an incredible transformational mindset that it really helps with more than even just the physicality of it, because you are willing to take on these really big, audacious goals with this. Now, for somebody like yourself who combines your passion of physical movement with also connection to community with your Back of the Pack Facebook group, and also giving back through philanthropy, how do you feel like you balance it all and still prioritize yourself, your work, all of the different assets? How do you balance this?
Sure. So I think that success takes time, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice for your goals? And so when I got my current position at the university, I called various friends to let them know I got hired there. And they said, "Oh, so you're running the program?" And I said, "No, absolutely not. I'm not doing management. I'm just teaching." So knowing that for myself, when
Mm-hmm.
I've been in management positions before, and when I get in those positions, I become too work focused and I don't have a good work-life balance. So for me, I'm happy just teaching my classes, right? I don't have to be in charge of anything. So putting boundaries around my time, knowing what to say no to. I belong to a local track club.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of pressure within the track club to do the local races and even to do a local cross country series that is here. I love the local races. I love the cross country series, but I've learned to say no if it doesn't fit into my overall training plan. And I just think that that's a big one. A lot of times we just feel the pressure to do things, but if it doesn't serve your overall goal, don't do it.
Yeah, I know it's cliched, but I don't know if it's Brene Brown or Mel Robbins, one of those where they have this kind of just really quick, poignant question to ask yourself: if by saying yes to someone else, where are you having to say no to yourself? So that's such a great, quick reminder that time is finite. It's our one resource that we can never multiply or duplicate. So really figuring out where to prioritize that. So tell me, because we are just scratching the surface on all the things that you tackle and you do. I know that there's writing and that your running has helped you not just to rediscover yourself, but also help you to tune into your creativity with poetry and writing as well. Where do you feel you're going to go next? I hear that you're going to do Dopey, you're pursuing the majors. How does this all continue to tie in as you continue in your journey?
Yeah, you're right in the things that I'm doing. I'm also going for another Everesting event in Whistler, British Columbia in the end of August. So I have that coming up. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping to get into New York City Marathon in the fall with my charity Hope Story. Hope Story, if you're listening, I want to do that event. Select me, pick me. So, yes. So I'm just going to keep going as long as I can. Keep going. I love that they added Sydney. I've been there before. I presented at a nursing conference there. I'd love to go back there and run. I do plan on getting that on my schedule, not for 2025, but in the future.
Is there a place that you would like to see? And I do want to talk about Sydney a little bit, like how you feel about it in terms of it's not going to currently impact the current 6 stars. It's going to have its own little pathway to the 9 stars as they continue to build that. But how do you feel about the Abbott World Marathon Majors expanding? Let's start with that first.
I have a little bit of mixed feelings, only from the standpoint of, for myself, focused on the 6. It takes time. It takes money.
It takes a lot of resources. Yes.
It takes a lot of resources to do the 6. So in a way, them adding a 7th one feels like they've moved the goalpost. Now I have to achieve something else, right?
Mhm.
But on the other hand, I think it's only fair that if we're going to say world major marathons, that we do spread the marathons around the world so that there's a race that's, maybe close for some people versus right
Yeah,
now,
right.
all the travel that those folks in Australia would have to do to come to all of these races. So that's only fair. But
Okay.
I do know because of, like I said, my age, my knees, I'm going to go for the 6. And
Mhm.
then after that, sort of assess and see if I can go for the other 3. I'd love to. I want to. And then if they then add a 10th or 11th or 12th, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if
Okay.
I can do it.
I mean, I feel like you have the grit and determination, so I'm not at all concerned about that. I am curious as we talk about the majors. One thing that people usually will ask is which one should I want to tackle in order? And usually my answer is you take them as you can. Like you really, it's become such a really difficult between getting into lottery and as you said, even through charity bibs or even tours, it's become very difficult to get some of these slots. So you just get in where you can to tackle them. But if you could perfectly plan it out, which one would you want to finish for your final 6 of the World Marathon Majors? Is there one that you kind of want to have as your official celebration?
Like you, I'd want to finish at Tokyo. And it's because I would hope by that time, maybe I'm more trained than I am now, and I would be able to meet the cutoffs. So I think that would be a good one to save for last. Kind of put all my eggs into it, just give it my all, leave everything on the table, and walk
Do
away
you
with the 6-star.
do you have a timeline that you want to be able to tackle all of the majors in, or you kind of just again you have so many interests in your Everesting and dopey, all of these different things going on? Do you have you're kind of just letting them fall where they may, or do you specifically say this year I have to do this major, or this year I want to do a major? How does
I'm
that
hoping
work for you?
I'm hoping like 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
I'll be
That's
I'll be done
that's
with it.
incredible. It took me
Hmm.
10 years. The pandemic closed down Tokyo. I was literally like 3 days out from leaving to go to Tokyo. And then, of course, it got shut down. So that's
Hmm.
why it moved into 2023 for me. But I always think it's amazing when I hear people talk about doing the majors in like 3 or 4 years. I'm like, it took me a decade. Like, seriously, it took me a
Yeah.
decade. And I'm okay with it because the time was going to pass anyway. So this has been such an incredible conversation. I want to encourage everyone who is considering the majors, who may feel like they're on the back of the pack, or maybe even if not, if you want to lend support and continue to encourage others on their journeys, to check out the Facebook group page. Also, because Theresa has provided us with so much incredible insights and inspiration, please do check out her Running on Hope virtual 5K. That link is in our episode notes. I am going to ask you one final question, which is what does it mean to be extraordinary to you?
Oh, honestly, I think it's to push yourself to a point where you've stripped away everything but your authentic self. And
Wow.
you can be exactly who you are.
Mic drop. So, with that, I'm going to say, Theresa, thank you for sharing this incredible story. I mean, your journey and just listening to you talk about it is just such a powerful reminder of how we can make these truly extraordinary strides towards our goals and towards what we want out of life. And I love hearing about your resiliency and your passion. So thank you so much. And friends, again, check out those links because you want to stay in touch. And of course, I can't wait to actually see you in person. I'm going to have to connect with you as soon as we're done with this. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I loved chatting with Theresa and learning more about her and her journey. But I also can't wait to get into this conversation as to how you can continue as a back of the pack runner. Make sure that you are equipped with everything you need to be successful on race day. So, as we continue to discuss all the little details of taking into consideration, one of the things that I want you to really be aware of is course-specific strategies. researching and planning for a smooth race day. Every race has unique logistics that can affect your experience as a back of the pack runner. Understanding how a race manages its cutoff times, road closures, and finish line operations can help you plan ahead and set realistic expectations. So as we already touched on, Tokyo of the World Marathon Majors has its own little quirks, but it's not the only one. However, before we dive into those tips a little bit more, I want to talk about races that are known for their back of the pack friendliness, and I want you to let me know if you're aware of a race that has a bit of extra love and joy and prepared to be more inclusive with how they approach race day. So New York City Marathon of the World Marathon Majors, that's going to be the number one. It gets a gold ribbon, takes first place with being known as not just an iconic race that's incredible through the 5 boroughs, but absolutely beautiful that it accommodates back of the pack runners. Roads gradually reopen as the course progresses, but runners are typically allowed to continue as long as they move to the sidewalk and continue working toward that finish line. The finish line remains open for many hours after the elite runners finish. Now, what is a really good idea is to check past results of the race that you are considering to see the range of finish times, and if that doesn't help really provide enough clarity, reach out and email the race organizers. The race director wants to help you get to that finish line safely. They are going to be willing to tell you everything you need to know as to how they handle that finish line experience and what you need to do to stay as safe as possible on that course. Additionally, another race that's known for its back of the pack friendliness, again, as we touched with Theresa, is Honolulu. Honolulu Marathon is known for the aloha spirit, and it welcomes runners of all paces. Aid stations and support stay open late into the day, making it a great choice for first-timers or those wanting a no-pressure race. Now, what's really important when you are racing and looking at other races is, again, confirming the finish line and timing mats will remain operational late into the event if you plan to need a bit more time on that course. And another race that's really well known for its back of the pack friendliness is Little Rock Marathon. Now, it's famous for something more than just being inclusive of time. It's famous for its big old medals. I mean, I am telling you, friends, they pack a lot of bigness in Little Rock. Little Rock is, though, a back of the pack paradise. The race offers one of the most generous time limits, up to 8 hours. And it is important, though, that you do take into account that not only do they have that generous cutoff time or time limit, that they do keep their roads open. So again, checking with your specific race that you're intrigued with to see how they handle those roads reopening during the later hours and how that can impact your race experience. I cannot stress that enough. So here are the questions that I want you to keep in mind, maybe jot them down, save this for whenever you're looking at the race that you want to do to avoid surprises on race day. You're going to want to know what happens after cutoff times. Will you be asked to be moved to the sidewalk? Will aid stations remain stocked and open for late runners? Will the course be monitored for safety after roads reopen if they are reopening? You're going to also want to ask about that finish line being broken down. If you finish after the official cutoff time, will the finish line remain open? Will you still receive a medal, finisher photos, and post-race amenities in an official course time? These are all really important to ask about, especially that official course time if you are tackling the World Marathon Majors, as you may be aware that Boston had a bit of controversy. We had a runner that crossed that finish line. This was their 6th race on their quest, and unfortunately, they did not qualify for their 6th star because Boston did not give them an official race time. So really finding out those little details and is key so that you are prepared and equipped. You're also going to want to ask, how long will timing mats stay operational? Because again, if you qualify for those time-based medals or challenges, you need to know those details, that you get the actual split times along the course as well. And of course, you're going to want to ask about medical and safety support. Will medical staff and race marshals remain on the course for late finishers? Do you need to be aware of the course on your own? Because you may be one of the last few individuals out there, and if there's no one directing you, is that something you need to be prepared for? Additionally, checking those previous year's results. That's going to really help quite a bit as you're looking for information on what race to tackle. But it doesn't stop there, my friend. Again, the internet's made the world an incredible place, so you can explore race reviews, websites like Race Raves, or social media groups like the Abbott 6-Star Finisher. Back of the Pack often have first-hand accounts from runners who finished near the back of the pack, asking fellow runners, reaching out to running communities or forums, checking the fine print, thoroughly read the race website, FAQ sections, and participant guide for information about cutoff times and course policies, especially if you're planning on tackling Tokyo or races that are in Asia or out of the country, because each country has its own unique way of approaching courses, racing, and making sure that you are there to get the experience you want when you spend that much money to travel overseas. Okay, so I feel like I've kind of almost beaten this dead horse a bit too much, but information is valuable. It's key for you, my friend. Next, I want to talk about that mindset shift. It is imperative that you always approach these races knowing that you deserve to be there just as much as the person who comes in first. You absolutely are valuable as a runner. Your race day experience should be just as wonderful as anyone else's. And I want you to shift your mindset, building that confidence, feeling empowered, and being proud of your accomplishments. Because whether you come in first or last, your effort deserves to be celebrated. Remember, it's all about the training journey, being better than yesterday, and really making that progress, working towards our best self. Focusing on your progress, because every step forward is a step closer to your goals. All right, Rockstar, I want to thank you so very much for joining me in today's episode of Extraordinary Strides. I want to remind you that as a back of the pack runner, you are an absolutely extraordinary individual, and every finish line you cross, every step you take adds to the rich tapestry of the running community. We are so grateful for this running world to continue becoming more inclusive, to really allow for all paces and abilities to be represented on race day and in our everyday lives. Huge thank you to Theresa for sharing her story, reminding us all of the power of resilience and community. Be sure to check out those episode notes again. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you share it with a fellow runner or leave a review to help us inspire even more athletes to dream big and stride toward greatness. Until next time, keep striding forward, my friend. You've got this. I'm Coach Christine, and this is Extraordinary Strides.